Hi, my name is Nick Craig. This is the Leading from Purpose podcast. Today, my special guest, friend and colleague for a number of years, is Pablo Perversi. Pablo right now works for a company called Berry Calibut, and most of us don't know it, but they're responsible for a large proportion of the cocoa that is then turned into chocolate in the world. And he has a fabulous job. He's the head of innovation. How'd you like to be the head of innovation for chocolate? Quality and sustainability, which is very important in the context of the ecosystem. But he's also, that's his title, but he's also in charge of is it gourmet?
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is a real, when you think about this, this is a truly interesting title, okay? Now, as we get into this, what's really, everyone who's listening is going to really have a little chuckle when they hear what your purpose statement is. So let's just go, Pablo, right to your purpose statement if we could.
Well, my purpose is to inject the Epicurean force of growth into plain sailing. Injecting is about positive energy, passion, desire for that change. Epicurean is because I love all the things that have to do with food, from the feeling it causes when you're eating it, to the fact that food is as diverse as the whole world can actually be. Force of growth is because I truly believe that growth is the biggest motivator of people and organizations in the whole world, and it's the biggest value creator as well, if you ask any analyst or anybody. And into plain sailing is because I think that as there's a challenge, plain sailing can be pretty boring, actually. So I like to use my mind to bring about change in a way that can really bring impact to the world rather than just be a flatliner.
Okay, so as everybody listens, you think about that purpose statement, what he just said, and you think of his role, and you go, okay, that sounds pretty cool, right? So, but what I want to do is, Pablo, is just take a second to go back and just think about, what do you believe from your perspective has been the power of having this clarity of what this purpose is for yourself over the journey? And you and I have probably known each other for about 10 years now. So how would you think about answering that for those listening?
Nick, I think, and you know it well, it starts by actually helping you really unravel yourself and know yourself pretty well. And I will always say to people that once you know yourself pretty well and you know what you're about, you can live pretty comfortably with yourself. And that actually implies a whole lot of other things in the way that people will relate to you and will be looking at you. Once you've got that peace of mind of who you are and where you want to be, it unleashes the energy that you have towards what you want to be doing. But if what you want to be doing is aligned with the things that you really enjoy, that bring you energy, that actually drive you into the future, it basically means that there's a lot of power in what you're doing. And I think that as time goes by, you really get to know yourself. You get to know the places where you work with that energy and passion. And then on top of that, you adopt that as your everyday way of approaching life. It becomes a very powerful way of working.
So do you have some examples for yourself of where you've been, where that's actually happened?
Look, I can find examples all throughout my life, maybe in a less structured way when I didn't have a purpose. So it was all kind of intuitive, yeah. In a much more structured way, as I had a purpose and I could actually really find that those were the things that were giving me energy. And when I used to work in Unilever, I was in charge of food for Europe, which is a very big 3 billion portfolio of 65 plus brands. And we turned it from no growth into growth. And that's by really bringing a huge amount of energy, know-how, people, talent, but really with the energy to grow and to challenge the status quo. And did we challenge? Yeah, we sold brands, we bought brands, we actually went into a space of naturalness that the company had never done before, and continues to be, even after I've left, actually one of the biggest growth drivers. Things in vegan, in vegetarian, that were only the start of many things that you still see now in innovation. And I think all that challenge took a heck of a lot of energy. But at the same time, when you actually do it from a place of energy and passion, you're actually working with a lot of power. And I think that as time goes by within the job that I have right now, it's exactly the same thing. We've had two of the world's biggest innovations ever in chocolate, with Ruby and Whole Fruit. We're going into things that nobody has ever done before, going into valorizing the waste of cacao. And you can imagine how much waste there is, considering the beans are only a small part of the cacao. Just like the apple, you don't just eat the beans. Yeah, so there's a lot more in the apple than the beans, and the cocoa is exactly the same. The cabosse, the fruit of the cacao, only has beans that we use, but it has juice inside, it has a whole load of husk, and all of those things have goodies that you can reuse and valorize. And for that, you need to farm differently. So we're encouraging farmers to farm differently as well. So farmers all of a sudden, not just farm differently, they get more money for it. We're improving living standard around the world. There's a huge amount of stuff. And the same thing goes for sustainability. I've been lucky enough to join a team where we've set very strong targets into the future. But in order to deliver those aggressive targets of carbon zero or forest positive, or even taking people out of poverty within the supply chain, or no child labor, it means basically that you've got to invent the future so that those things don't happen anymore. And that's what my purpose is all about. You know, it's about really challenging the status quo, making sure that we grow, making sure that that challenge is there to reinvent that growth model, and bringing people with you and bringing talent. And that's also part of what we've been doing. So it's always with me in my personal life.
It's, you know, when you talk like this, Pablo, you make it sound like it was all really easy. And the truth is that you and I have had a couple of breakfasts together when, for the most part, it wasn't feeling very easy. Do you know what I'm saying? So I just love for people who are listening, because I think the challenge is everybody goes, oh, wow. So, you know, with purpose, it's like all these magical things happen and it's like whatever. So I'd love you to talk a little bit about sometimes one of the gifts of purpose is it lets you see, but one of the challenges is you see things others people can't. And just what's it been like to be able to see the possibilities that others can't? Because, you know, before you showed up where you work now, all the issues you're describing have been there for as long as cocoa's been harvested, right? So you come in with beautiful purpose and this point of view, and all of a sudden you see things that others don't. And so what is it like to go from seeing it to then the challenge of how do you translate that insight into impact for you? What's that journey been like?
Well, seeing it is a gift that I have that not many other people actually have, and I'm continuously looking for growth and for opportunities and for the challenge that will make us better. And I think that because I'm working to that purpose, it actually allows me to work in a very relaxed way, looking for those things. And I have that gift that I can see it whilst other people might not. But I also have the gift that I like to get the growth out of it. And therefore, operationalizing what you see is something that is very important to me, because otherwise it doesn't actually have a value in the way that people will get it eventually. So I have to work very hard, and I don't think you can underestimate how hard you have to you work to produce change. Change is not something that happens from one day to another. Change in an industry where you have farmers who are poor is very difficult in some cases. And finding the models that are going to get you out of that are models that take time. Child labor in Europe took years to get out. We shouldn't expect them to happen from one day to another in Africa today. But the truth of the matter is that you can go a heck of a long way in terms of making sure that the child could work at the farm, but at the same time, he's actually going to school. And that already gives the kid a head start in life because he will be educated and he'll be able to read and write. And we have a direct correlation between farmers that are educated and the fact that their kids don't work in farms either, or don't work as a laborer in the farm, developing hampering their development. So what actually happens is, at the end of the day, when you're living to your purpose, is just as hard as when you don't live to your purpose. You might get frustrated about different things, but anything that produces change and that you're driven for will require you to work at your best. And when you work at your best and you're seeing things that other people don't see, you get into change management. And change management is not an easy thing, neither here or there or anywhere, because people will be not liking it. You will be changing the reality for many people, and everything that goes with change. But altogether, when you're doing it from a place where it gives you energy, where you start to see the fruits of what you plant, and where that eventually becomes the seed that you plant that turns into not just one plant, but many plants that people start wanting to do because they see the value in it, well, then that's where it becomes a very, very exciting proposition. And that's exactly what I take a lot of joy in doing. Because when you actually start to see that it's not just one factory to valorize the fruit, but it's now 2 factories, and we're planning the 3rd, and suddenly it's becoming a big business, and we're planning on getting farms to change the way that they harvest and changing the technology around it, and it's not 1 farmer or 2 farmers, but it's 3 or 4 or 5, and then the ball starts going and the snowball gets bigger. Then that's where it gets really, really exciting, and you start to see your change and your implant or your impact in the world, and that's what motivates me.
So in some sense, if I listen to you, as hard as some of this stuff is the possibility of what can happen is always what's in your head, keeping you sort of willing to lean into the wind as you get the pushback. So can you describe to me one of those situations where you had a lot of pushback and you just sort of figured out how to either go around it or through it or over it to be able to get to the other side? Because it still, once again, sounds like somehow magically you've figured out you've got the golden pill for like getting around what most of us sort of sometimes feel like we're dealing with when we have to try to make something like that happen.
Yeah. Look, by definition, a person that can actually visualize and also bring the future to today is a person that is going to have a gift that not many people will accept. Yeah, you have the people who are dealing with today having to do results, and those people will not be very happy with having to give their money to you so that you can actually construct something that is not proven, and they have to believe in you. Second thing that you have to deal with is the fact that, as a general rule, the persons that are actually dealing in these areas will be people that get a lot of attention, because you are creating the future. Everybody wants to understand what you're creating. And as a result, some of your peers become jealous, yeah, to say it in a way that is fair. And that is actually and that is actually something difficult to deal with in the context of you're not there to actually create a bad relationship with anybody, but it's just the sheer fact that there's a lot of attention, there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of money sometimes going into these initiatives that actually causes people to actually just react in a bad way, because they're getting all the results, and you're producing the future but not the results, and the analysts want the results but you're getting the attention, and this is actually sometimes difficult for certain people, I think the other thing is you are exposing yourself to your belief in so many things, but your belief is not necessarily a proven model. So
Yeah.
you have to live very comfortably with making a lot of mistakes and learning. And having to explain sometimes that those mistakes cost money. But the upside of it is also a huge upside if it actually does very well. And not many people live comfortably with that. And you will have some people that don't want to give you money for you to make mistakes. But if you want to implement the future that nobody has actually treaded on before, bringing that puzzle together and making it work to the cost that is right for the company and making money from the beginning, and all the things that have to go right for that to be in place is not an easy thing. And then you have people who are actually risk averse and people who are risk prone, and the risk averse people will be pretty damning to you in so many circumstances. So you have to have a pretty broad shoulder and live quite comfortably with the fact that you're doing what you really believe in, to sleep well, because you will have a lot of disruption factors and people who will try to poke their stick on your wheel.
It's interesting because, the research shows that if we look at uncertainty and the stress that it creates for us, and you're talking about this right now, there's two responses. There's the fight or flight response, which is where you freeze basically. Either you do nothing or you run away or you chase after somebody. And then there's this thing called the challenge response, where you basically lean in and say, okay, I'm just going to make this thing happen. And I think that all your stories are the challenge response. Now, what's interesting is that the research also shows that the thing that causes you to pivot from one to the other is when you have the belief that you have the resources, you will step into the challenge response. Belief is the key word here, not the reality of what is it, the resources you have or not. And my sense about you, I think about your purpose, is at its core is this enormous belief of the possibility of what can be created. And my sense of you has always been is that when everybody else was running for the door saying, no way, you're always curiously going, well, that's interesting. Why did that happen as opposed to this other thing? And you're like the curious kid in the room saying, well, it blew up, but I might not have any hair left, but oh, that's interesting. It was definitely a very different explosion than the last one. And everybody else is like, let's stop doing this. And that extra layer of curiosity that I think is the essence of who you are and your purpose is why I think you have continued to find the new horizon. The uncharted territory by definition is uncharted, but it's also where all the good stuff is, right? Because all the charted stuff, everybody's fighting over. So my sense of you is that you've done that.